until after we were here. That the instructions of who would be responsible would not be revealed until we arrived here. And in turn, we departed London just after midnight, the 19th of December, 1606. 4 days passage down the Thames River. All's well, collecting people and things. And then we was free of land, and we lingered within sight of London, in sight of England, for another 6 weeks. The weather against us, the wind, so that we could not break free of the English Channel. Now mind you, we had victuals for 3 months, and we were 6 weeks still looking at England. Half of our victuals spent. This is why we had to stop in the Canaries. It's why we had to stop thrice in the Caribbean. And it's why it wasn't not until the 6th and 20th of April 1607, just at dawn, the miners in the distance caught sight of land, Virginia. That afternoon, within the confines, the basin of the Chesapeake Bay, and 'twas then the gentlemen could no wait, below deck of the largest ship, the Susan Constant, they opened the box with the instructions, but they were more interested in who would be the leaders. It was a list. 7 men upon it, 7, that would rule over the 104 men and boys that was to be left here in Virginia. 7 men, 6 of them gentlemen, but the 7th, most unusual, a common man, son of a yeoman farmer, who by the by, at that juncture, just happened to be below deck in chains for having spoken ill to a gentleman, so the gentleman said. And of course that man in chains, one Captain John Smith, son of a yeoman farmer, whose father wanted better for him, seen to it that he was allowed a very fine opportunity. He was apprenticed to a wealthy merchant, and a year into his apprenticeship, sadly his father died, and Smith, done with that business, crossed the Channel to Brittany, then to the Dutch Low Countries, to fight alongside the Dutch against the Spaniards. And then he made his way across Europe to a place called Romania, where a Christian prince, a number of them, were fighting the Turks coming up from Turkey. And on a field of valor, 3 days consecutive, as the armies of the Christians collected, and to the other side of a great plain, the army of the Turks, as more would come up, they were massing. But there's that moment when it's all still, sometimes 2-3 weeks, but there's no fighting but waiting for more. And when one army thinks it has superior, then it attacks. But as they done that, men get restless upon the front line, and there were calls, insults back and forth. Captain Smith, being an Englishman and a minority, thought he would answer it, and on 3 days he met in mortal combat with a Turk, and in 3 consecutive days he beheaded his opponent. And after the 3rd beheading, the Christian prince awarded him his captaincy upon the field for bravery. He was given the command of soldiers of a different tongue, but he executed it well. And in the following months, time and again, there were battles, 4 of significance, and in each one, Smith and his command prevailed. But then there was the 5th battle. They were soundly defeated, surrounded. Smith was taken captive, taken to Istanbul, where he was sold into slavery. And his master, neglectful of him, glory be, he killed his master after a year being enslaved to him, made his way back across Europe, across the Channel, just in time to turn 5 and 20 years old, already living a life. That is why Captain John Smith was the 7th man of the 7. But no respect for him for his captaincy awarded by a foreign prince. Below deck in chains. It took them a month to sort it out. He was eventually allowed to take his place on council, but not until after a great many decisions that he has since thought he would not have made. They were ill-advised, but it makes no matter. The instruction were to find a river that would carry us further us into the interior, with the river bound to the north and west. For there them toward the south, the Spaniards, some in England, to believe it, that is Mexico, the northernmost province of New Spain. It is very narrow. Mayhaps as North America continues north, it does broaden, but mayhaps it narrows again. And mayhaps the rivers that feed the Chesapeake Bay, one of them bound furthest to the north and west, the gentlemen were convinced it with the London Company. There's a mountain chain to the west. The naturals have told us the Portugals have known it since the 1540s, but they've come into the bay to take on fresh water. The Spaniards have known it. The mountains to the west, the gentlemen back in London believed if you would send them mountains and look toward the west on a clear day, mayhaps you could see the glistening of the China Sea. Why? And in turn our instruction to find the river that would carry us furthest to the north and west. No less than 100 miles to take it up, to make it more difficult for the Spaniard to find us, for surely they will be envious of us here and attempt in some way to destroy us. 'Tis all well that. And in turn find a place uninhabited by the naturals. Upset them not, for who will know where the gold or the silver is? But the naturals cause no offense to them. And as we came up the lowest river that would feed the basin of the Chesapeake Bay, we named it after our good king, the James. 60 miles after the ocean, we found this isle. An isle with nigh on 100 yards of slope up from where the edge of the island terminates with the channel. The channel runs right against the shore. The highest point on the isle, here at the westernmost end, overburdened with trees. And in turn, all had we to do was tie the trees off to low branches, a gangplank down on terra firma, and walk up the hill betwixt and between the trees. And the water. When we first arrived here, my friends, the water was sweet and wholesome and refreshing. And there was no sign of the Indians. Everything save 60 miles should have been 100. But all the rest, easily defensible. But build a gun platform. We had bought with us near 5 and 20 cannon. To lay them out upon a raised platform here as the contour of the isle turns into a gut yonder. But still, with the channel against the shore, if the Spaniards were to be so bold as to come to try to attack us as they turned downriver, following that gut, the cannon on those ships would be facing inland, down yonder, but the side of the ships would be exposed to our 5 cannon here. And in turn, we could rake down the sides of them and annihilate them. The gentlemen believed this was the best place, and we all concurred. That was the 14th of May. We come ashore. It was the 13th in the afternoon. We arrived just there, threw out the gangplank first. The gentlemen walked up, realized the highest point, right there. This is the spot, they said. The 14th we started. Come along here. Come along. Highest point here on the entirety of the isle. And as I spoke, when we first arrived, it was all overburdened with trees. beginning the 14th of May, our instruction to come ashore with axes and begin to cut away trees, topple them. Trees, clear a place to erect our tents, clear a space yonder, which we done, to begin to plant our barley and our wheat that we brought up with us. And in turn, it was the 20th that the gentlemen, 5 of them, and 15 miners took the smallest of the 3 ships, the Discovery, their intent to go westward up the King's River, as far as they could carry, mayhaps to a juncture where in the distance they could perceive the mountains, knowing just beyond that their hope, the China Sea lay. And in turn, as they departed, they left it us to cut and to clear. There were discussion upon building a fort, and the determination was we wanted not to offend the naturals, to make them think that we'd come to wage war. And how to rectify that, it was quite easy. We shan't build a fort, but as we cut down the trees, the branches, the boughs, the instruction was to cast them across here, facing the interior of the island in the shape of a half moon. Such a device, I would offer to you, would not hold back rabbits. But we done as we was instructed. The gentleman further determined that we wanted not to appear to the naturals, for surely they would know we were here and investigate us, that we would not come here to wage war. So all the arms, our muskets remained in the ships in dry fats below deck, save a few long pieces and calivers, short muskets that the gentleman had brought. There was no defense for us. We continued clearing, and the 6th and 20th of May, a full 6 days after the gentleman had departed to go upriver, we took note in the morning, a gathering yonder where the tree line be, the naturals. And we thought, that's odd. Mayhaps they've come to greet us. One of the gentlemen thought mayhaps as many as 200 had gathered. And by the by, a bit of time passed it. And then it was mayhaps half that again. And then they attacked us. One gentleman thought mayhaps as many as 400. They assaulted us in waves that remained hot for nigh on an hour. They shot through our tents. Had it not been for the ships yonder lying, bar shot from their cannon shot over our heads into the trees and the branches yonder, to fall down, to rain down on our assailants. Had it not been for that, surely we would have been destroyed complete. As it were, after that hour, 4 or 5 of the council had been injured, 18 in total. The president elected, a gentleman, Master Wingfield, an arrow shot completely through his beard. No other harm. But one boy was killed, an arrow into his leg, and he bled to death. We buried him just yonder. And the next day, as the gentleman determined we would build a fort, and we started to build what you see here. The instruction was simple. A ditch, a channel 2 feet deep, every 9 feet, a stout post. And you can tell as you look where the stout posts are. You look at where 2 rails intersect. But those stout posts every 9 feet, packed tight, and then to fill betwixt each every 9 feet was easier than what you could fathom. A stand of trees in this country that is 60 feet tall, they're everywhere as that. But fathom, if you please, a stand of trees 60 foot tall, topple one of them at the base, the girth at the base, that at the top 60 foot, that 60 foot tree, 12 foot pieces, you get 5 times an opportunity. Starting at the top, that saw it with a cross-cut saw at 12 feet. It goes into the ground against one of them stout posts. The next run of 12, cut it at 12, split it in two, for its girth is that. The third of 5, saw it at 12, split it and split that again into quarters. The fourth, saw it at 12, and out of that you get 8 pieces. And the final, the girth of that, you cut it, split it, split it, split it, and split it. You get 16 for a total out of one tree of 31 pieces. And you can see how betwixt the stout post that is packed tight, all needed we to do then was to take those bits, halves, quarters, 16ths, 8ths, and small holes into the channel, packed tight, and join each one of them against them stout posts. Took us 2 weeks. We was proud of our accomplishment. Truth, we was. We got that done. Master George Percy, youngest brother of the 9th Earl of Northumberland, youngest brother, mind you, no estate for him, not any. So his brother bought him shares of stock in the company so he could come here and find gold and become rich. He determined that he wanted to go for a preambulation into the interior. Asked me if I would conduct with him. Well, he more or less ordered it. Another with myself, for the other that Master Wingfield did after he was attacked, was ordered the muskets and the armours and the swords and the helms to be brought out. And we walked, I suspect, 2 of us soldiers and 4 gentlemen beyond 4 miles into the interior, where we saw what would be a paradise. Sweet vines, suckles growing everywhere. There were diverse sorts of flowers and scents as sweet as you could ever fathom it. There was flowers as like any English garden or orchard. And the truth is, there are vines halfway up a tree. The vines here, the size of a man's thigh. They yield some grapes, not all, but some in the late summer. But it were like the Garden of Eden. Master Percy spoke of it. We thought we had found what God had selected for us to be. 'Twas the 22nd of June. Captain Newport took 2 of the ships that had brought us, restored himself, bound back to England. He said, I will not linger, but to fraught the ship with supplies and be back, mayhaps as short a time as just beyond 4 months. It took him 6 months to get back. And the week, my friends, the week after he departed, all that we thought was sweet turned against us, and we were destroyed. Amongst my former friends, I made mention when we first arrived here that we believed this to be the place chosen for us by Providence. I spoke of when we arrived here the water was sweet, and we understood not that was a deception. The burden is, it was not until last summer we gained an understanding. The naturals did tell us that when we were in our voyage, in the earliest part of 1607 crossing the ocean, severe snow in this country, and sleet and ice toward the west in the mountains, very thick. And then the spring came and the heat, and all that ice and snow started to melt, and it come down here, and it made this water at low tide seem sweet, for it was sweet, overburdened with fresh water. It is not normal the case. You see, the week after Captain Newport left it, the last apparently of that ice and snow had melted, and the river played to us what it really is. And we began to die. We were destroyed with cruel diseases, swellings, fluxes, burning fevers, and by wars with the naturals that we was given instruction under all circumstances to maintain peace with. There were never Englishmen left in a foreign country, my friends, in such misery as were we in this newly discovered Virginia. We watch it every 3 nights, lying on the bare, cold ground, what weather soever come, and then we warded all the next day, which made our men most feeble. Our food, a small can of barley, sod and water, to 5 men a day. Our drink, cold water taken from the river that at flood were very salt, but at low tide it was full of slime and filth that brought the destruction to many of our men. As we lived in this misery some 5 months, not having 5 able men to man the bulwarks upon any occasion. Our men night and day are groaning in every corner of this fort. Most pitiful to hear. Our houses, castles in the air, rotten tents. We dug holes against the palisado and pulled across it bits of canvas to accommodate ourselves. It was 10th of September. We buried 41 of 104. By the end of September, 51. The instruction from the company, allow not the naturals to know your numbers have diminished. And how do you do that? You bury your friends inside the fort. So they're here now. It was towards the end of September when the cool breeze that had greeted us every morning before the summer, it did come back from the northwest it were. And as we recovered, we realized what we'd put off. I thought to shield you from this, but you deserved it all. The miners had failed to tell us that as they brought our supplies off the ships, our barley in casks had been stored below deck in the ship that had leaked the most. And they told us not, but having baked below deck for 4 months, it had as many worms as grains to it, and that was our victual for the summer. Just there, where our tent for our supplies, where our storehouse is now. So the next that we did as we recovered, Captain Smith was determined to be made the Cape merchant, responsible to take glass beads, brass bells, bits of copper in truck with the naturals. My dear Captain John Martin, always thinking of others, mind you, he instructed me to accompany Captain Smith downriver to fetch him back food. I was glad to be rid of the rest. Captain Smith wanted light. There were but 7 of us and him in our shallop of 2 tons. We went down to a village that we had encountered when we first had come into the Kings River, just where it feeds the Chesapeake Bay. The village is called Kickertown. Bandoleros with gunpowder in them. Matchlock, the slow match are burning over our heads. Helms, swords, breastplates. Nay, it looked not like we were there for war, eh? 7 of us coming ashore in a broad-breasted boat that would run aground in 4 feet of water. God be saved, it was 3 feet when it did stop into the sand, and we over the gunnels above, wading in. We visited the village when we first had come up the river. We noted the configuration, but as we came up that hill, none to be seen. They're Yehakins, they're long houses there, as if they just walked away. But beyond, I expect 7, 8 of them, the houses, a tree line, and in the distance movement. And as we waded ashore, we seen them. Our instruction from Captain Smith to form a circle, each of us pointing out the 7 of us, he within the midst of the circle. And he would direct what we was to do. But we was there for peace. But yet we looked like we was there for war. You've not seen the naturals, for you've been here but 4 days. And it is a shock when you first encounter them. Mind you, they have little modesty about them, and it is the way they conduct themselves. They wear very little to cover their nakedness. They have a bit of animal skin about their midst, and that is always toward the front. The bums are as there for God just put them there to see. The countenance that they bear in their natural state is not white, but it's not red or brown. It is darker than white, but they appear red or brown. In that, in every village, every Yehakin, their long houses, Yehakins, every family, a clay pot, near always upon a fire, 3 great stones, and the pot sits there with the suet, the fat of deer, and coals banked around it, so that the suet reduceth itself to an oil. And 'tis a root that they grind up fine. They surrender not as it grows, for we've not seen what green it looks in the wood, but always dried it, but ground up fine in a mortar and pestle. They cast the dust into that boiling deer oil. And once it is boiled well, they anoint their bodies with it. 'Tis a root they call pacun, but it casts their color to be matter, a dark red or brown. And they do that not to make themselves pretty as they think, but that pacun upon their skin, once they've done that and they're oiled there, no fleas or mosquitoes will land upon them. So fathom, if you please, they're warriors. 40 of them at Kikotan, 40. When the young men come of age, the women take shells that hath been sharpened upon flat stones, and the women will grate and scrape all their hair from this side of their head, so when they draw back their bowstring, they've got not hair there to get caught to it, but this side 'tis long. Some as long as an ell, 45 inches, an ell. It is very finely woven, and they covet that lock greatly. If ever any offense to a chief, the Manitowic, the Emperor, Powhatan, or a lesser chief, their Werowonces, the worst that can ever happen is that tuft of hair is cut off. It's the worst disgrace they can cause. But fathom that day at Kikotan, 7 of us wading ashore, and out of the tree line, 40 of them, quiver at their backs, bow in their hands with arrows knocked to it, and they surround thrice our little circle of 7. And they started on us the same words. Ka! Katura winks Yowo! Not over one or the other, but each waiting their turn. But from different quarters, one toward me, those same words. Ka! Katura winks Yowo! Did point toward my shoes. And I knew not what to say. I just stood there. Matchlock, the slow match cocked to it, not wanting ever to think of what calamity would befall for one of them muskets to go on. It seemed like an hour, them same words from different, they kept at us. It was no more than 30 seconds. But it's time like that. It drags and it goes as fast and as rapid as a rain, so swift. And then suddenly you realize Captain Smith, he's broken free of the circle. And he's gone to the stoutest, the tallest he can. His ear keen to the tongue of others for his time in Europe. And he looked toward that Indian standing there. Ka! He says what they'd said back. Ka! Katura winks Yowo! Pointed toward the Indian's shoes. The Indian spoke back, moccasin. And it meant not to us at the time. But then Captain Smith on his heel, he turned to a different quarter. Ka! Katura winks Yowo! Pointed toward the arrow, knocked in the bow. The Indian spoke back a taunts, and then toward the river. Here betwixt us, the naturals, and the river. Ka! Katura winks Yowo! Pointed toward the water. And 3-4 of them spoke the same word, Sakahana. And then he turns back to, we lads, we got not to fear, says he. They are proper people. They desire to trot with us. But being proper, they ask us, Katulowinks Yoa, what call you this? He produced it from his bag, a waste book. He had a bit of black lead that he had stuck into the quill of a goose. And he sat amongst them for an hour's time and played a game, Katulowinks Yoa, and would point at such as they had. And as they would speak it, he would reward them with a bit of copper or a piece of a glass bead or brass bell. That day we learned how they count. Nika, nin, nus, yao, parents, komatins, tapawas, naswas, kiketawa, kask. We learned it how they ask for corn. Kask, tanks, Manitoyans, maize. How much for 10 little baskets of maize, 1 piece of copper for 10 bushels of corn? We frotted that shallop and had come back here thinking that the gentleman would be pleased. And all he said was, is that all you have brought? 4 more times we went upriver. 8.5 miles to the river that joins to the northwest, the Chickahominy. And I accompanied Smith those 4 times. Each time we'd start where we'd left it off. So we wore not our welcome anywhere along the way. The 4th voyage, we ran out of river into a great vast desert of ooze. And what was amongst it? Frozen ooze that turned about. Captain Smith, desirous to see if round about, mayhaps he would gain advantage upon a hill and look in the distance and see the mountains. And he was encountered by the great war chief of the Pamunkey, Opachanka now, who was out a hunting. And end of that, he was taken captive. We thought he had been captured and killed. And we did not see him again until the 2nd of January, when the Indians brought him back here. He had been made a lesser chief by the great emperor himself, Powhatan. The Indians that restored him to us delivered to us deer and turkey. And Captain Smith joining us made 38 alive at that point out of 104. We was happy. The next day Captain Newport finally arrived with 40 souls, supplies, and their miners helped us start to build our church and our storehouse, and beyond it our stove, where down in the ground we digged the side out of the cellar, and 2 ovens there, our kitchen. Newport departed in early April the 10th, and 10 days later Captain Nelson arrived with 40 more. The Phoenix, they left out of London together, but a storm in the Caribbean parted them, to the extent that Captain Nelson had to stop on an isle and careen and repair the Phoenix, that ship. So he finally got here and lingered until the beginning of June. Those miners on the Phoenix aided us just yonder to build a saw pit, and we sawed cedar and split some for clapboard and loaded the ship with that. But it was at that time as well that Captain Smith determined that he wanted to explore the Chesapeake Bay. I was selected to accompany him 2 times that. We went down the Kings River and up, each time 7 weeks. June the 2nd to July 21st. We come back here, rested but 3 days, departed again the 24th, and did not come back until the 7th of September. That second exploration, we found the headwaters of the Chesapeake Bay and a giant-like people that dwell upon it. They call themselves the Susquehannocks, and the river that they occupy the same name. And what they told us through sign, for they speak a different tongue, is there is no inland sea, and there's naught that connects toward the west, toward the north, up the Susquehannock. They says, "'Tis 5 bodies of water, but they are joined to the east, not the west." And we made inquiry, well, what is bound to the west? And they says, but more land. So we did come back here the 7th of September, not with any great pomp and circumstance, but to disappoint the gentleman, for we gained no understanding of the glistening of the China Sea. We had found no gold or silver, and the gentleman mightily disappointed. The 10th of September, Captain Smith was elected president of the council, and that's when he stood right yonder in the midst of the fort, having tired himself with the gentlemen who'd beat it on him and shirked their duty and beat upon us laborers. And basically he told them that he was tired, that there were no other council members alive, for they was here, or they had restored themselves to England. And he said he was now in charge, and he would no longer tolerate their idleness. He told them, "Those that shall not work shall not eat." And those of us laborers, we just stood by and smiled a bit, but not so that the gentleman could see it. And he forced them to work. Captain Newport came back for the 2nd time. That was the beginning of October, and brought 80 more supplies. And when he departed, Captain Smith repeated, "Those that will not work will not eat." We digged at our first well inside the fort, just beyond the storehouse yonder, betwixt the storehouse and our stove. Our blacksmith shop yonder in the cellar, all you see just above, right yonder, is that roof, low to the ground. The blacksmith shop is in the ground yonder. Our barracks, just there, for the reasoning Captain Smith thought the greatest fear we have the Spaniards, not the natural, and in turn we should have the soldiers and our arms stored close to where them guns are, the cannon yonder. We enlarged the fort last fall from 3-sided to 5. The west wall stayed, the south wall stayed, but where the southeast bulwark is yonder, where it joined the old east wall, we added a new wall toward the east. Where the north bulwark yonder joins the old east wall, we added a wall yonder. And then to join them two in the distance, we added a new east wall out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. And in them, we've got a place where the gentlemen, them that says they know alchemy, that they can practice it, and some refiners that search for gold. And I suspect again, pigs would sooner fly than they'll turn lead to gold. But it is what they want to try. You've arrived at a good time and a hard time, my friend. Now I have one more spot for you, and I know it will cause some of you great disdain, for it is in the shade upon benches, and I apologize for that. So come along here.